Okay. Hey, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, self-publisher, and I share my creative process here with you on the internet. If you enjoy this channel, these videos that I share, and would like to support it, please join me on Patreon, subscribe to my Patreon campaign. You can go to patreon.com/GERIMI. It's patreon.com/Jeremy. If you would like to see what I am up to throughout the month, you can go to my my newsletter. Subscribe at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my books, or if you read digitally on Amazon Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. All right. See, we already got folks in the chat. See, Amar's in the chat. He says, Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday, Amar. How you doing? See, Amaris is in the chat. How you doing? Ion Rocks. What's up, man? And Amar says she got back into costume design. Well, good. Congratulations. It's that is a fun and innovative field of creative expression. Cool. Glad to hear it. I see Darake in the chat. Hey, how you doing? All right. Here we go. So, right now, I actually just finished this page last night. So, let me see. The last thing that I'm going to have to do is flip this back, because right now it is, it's actually backwards. So let me flip this page. So yeah, this will actually be the reading order. And basically what's going on here is Lucifer has just told Uriel, the angel of death, that Michael murdered Raphael, which is a lie, which, Prince of Lies is kind of his thing, because he's actually the one who murdered it, but now he wants Michael to be eliminated, so he's sending Uriel to do his dirty work, because he's pretty much one of the strongest archangels and has the best chance of defeating Michael. So we've got him flying off, then Remiel kind of you know what? I should realize, even though she's far enough away that you don't have any facial details, I should really put in just the suggestion of eyes here, at least, so she's not a completely faceless creature. But basically, she's feeling a little bit of guilt and remorse at the fact that they are manipulating Uriel in this way, to which Lucifer is like, basically yelling at her like, what, are we supposed to just let Michael run wild and screw up our plans? And the fact that, he kind of blames her for not seducing Michael over to their side, which is what he, was hoping she would do. And she just kind of like doesn't have really anything to say about that, because no, she failed in seducing Michael. And so now they're just basically off now to finish their invasion of heaven. So, where are we at story-wise? Let me see. So with that page done, hang on, I'm just adjusting the camera ever so slightly. So let's see, the next page I've got these blank templates set up for each page, and this page is a silent one. Let me see where my thumbnails are. And I'll hold these thumbnails up to the camera so you can see what I'm doing. And you can see why there's no actual dialogue in this page. So I'm on page 5. Got this big old stack of hand-drawn ink thumbnails. At some point, I'm going to start putting together sort of a director's cut of Morningstar and sharing a lot more of these in the back pages as back matter, just so you can see all of this. And when I mentioned behind the scenes stuff from on my Patreon, a lot of this stuff is what I share. It's like the thumbnails and basically every step of the process. This is probably one of the few pages of thumbnails that I have drawn that really I kind of got in one pass. Because a lot of times you'll see as I go through that I will draw maybe 3 or 4 sheets of paper of me just working out the details of what's in a particular issue, of what's happening on a particular page. Just work out all the different angles. But on this page, let's see here. I'm not sure how well that'll show up because the area where the camera is a little bit in shadow. But it's basically a surface, the surface of the water that Michael is underneath, and then Michael just splashing out of the water dramatically, and then just looking intensely in his eyes. They're kind of like glowing with like light and energy. So let's see if you can see it a little bit better. Yeah, I don't know how well that's going to show up on camera here, but you can actually watch me draw it. So let's see. All right. Get a little sip of coffee here. I drink my coffee through a metal straw so that I don't get coffee stained teeth. Little OCD of me, but you know, I want to keep my teeth clean. Hopefully they will be with me for my whole life. All right. So I'm going to get in here just drawing, and if you guys make comments in the chat and I don't see them right away, that's okay. Sometimes I get caught up and I'm drawing for like 5-10 minutes and I'm talking as I'm going to get caught up. I'll try to remember to surface every so often and check the chat, answer any questions you guys have. So let's see here. Picking a brush. I've been using the peppermint brush in Procreate for my rough pencil sketches. It gives me like a nice kind of, it feels almost like the Ticonderoga 2B pencils, or Ticonderoga number 2 pencils. They're HB pencils, but just the old pencils you tend to use for testing in school. And so far, the peppermint pencil, which comes standard in Procreate, seems to, whoops, that is bad. Let me undo that. I erased everything. I thought that I had already created a separate layer to pencil on. So I've got my layer with my template, which I like to drop down to say, ooh, anywhere between 10 and 20%. Create my new layer to pencil on. Might as well lock this while I'm at it so I don't accidentally draw on it. All right. There we go. But yeah, this pencil gives me a nice naturalistic feel. It feels very much like what I am used to drawing with, and I think that digital medium works best when you can get it to, well, I was gonna say when you can get it to imitate your traditional media. But sometimes the whole point of using digital is also that you want to be able to do things that you couldn't do with traditional. So that might not necessarily be an accurate statement. I think that there's sometimes you want to use a tool because it can do something that you can't do any other way. Sometimes you want to use a tool because it mimics other tools that you're very comfortable with. You can't really make, you can make set rules about how to use tools, but I don't necessarily find that helpful. I think it's good to be open-minded to certain scenarios. I mean, even making rules. Sometimes making rules is restrictive and silly and it gets in your way. Sometimes restricting yourself helps you be more creative and innovative, or keeps you from struggling with endless thousands of choices by saying, I'm just giving myself this brush and this tool set or this color palette. Sometimes limiting yourself is useful. Sometimes limiting yourself is a pointless pain in the ass. There is no one answer. It depends on the artist, it depends on the situation, depends on the project, depends on the time that you have. And I think the hardest thing about these kind of choices, about how you use your tools or how many options you have, and particularly in this digital age of limitless options, the hardest thing is knowing when to zig and when to zag. Now, hang on. I don't want the bubbles to be, I started making the bubbles really receding into the background, but that would, story-wise, it would imply that he's swimming towards you, and that is not what I want to imply. What I want to imply is that he's directly under the surface and comes popping up. So I'm going to erase some of those bubbles that are receding into the background and just really try to keep the bubbles to the foreground here and just try to vary their size. Something else that I noticed when I was working, it's weird. It looks like the stream is still playing on my end, but I'm looking. Let me see. Nope, the live stream still seems like it's playing, but it looks like it's paused on my phone here. Just make sure that something screwy is not going on. Yeah, if anything seems like it's screwy on the chat and it seems like it like everything just froze all at once, somebody comment in the chat, just let me know if things are still running okay. Hopefully they are and you guys can hear me and I'm just being paranoid. Something that I noticed yesterday when I was finishing up that other page I was showing you is that I'm actually drawing too much. And what I mean by that is, let me go back to the page real quick. There's a lot of construction lines in this page. So I mean, you can very clearly see that this is still rough and it's not a final ink line. But as I was drawing this, I realized it would be very easy for me to go to final inks digitally. I think it's gonna be really hard for me to not do my next comic completely digitally and stop doing traditional inks because it's so easy having all of the tools right here. But the other thing I realized is that I'm drawing too much, not leaving myself enough to work out in the inking stage. Because for the most part, I've tried to keep these rough pencils rough and try to do most of the drawing in the inking. Because if everything is completely laid out, I find that my inking becomes very stiff. I really am just tracing then. Whereas if I leave things very rough and unfinished and a lot of construction lines, if it's mostly construction lines and indications of where all the elements go, I'm still actively engaged. I'm still actually drawing the page when I'm inking. So I realized when I was working on this page that maybe I need to back off a little bit in terms of how much detail I'm putting in and just draw what I need to tell the story. So me thinking, all right, I just need to block in that there's mountains. Maybe, instead of even detailing stuff, let's just put a couple X's in there. So that'll be all toned or all black, mostly black. I'll leave it. I kind of like, these days I've been drawing my blacks not solid, but leaving them patchy, leaving them texture in there, leaving streaks of direction that imply the direction that the surface is going. Or implying the orientation of the surface. So let's see. Oh, see a new person in the chat. Gaming artist said just found you. I'll sub. Thanks, I appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, I'm working on comic book pages from a series that I write and draw. It's called Morningstar, and it's Lucifer's Fall from Heaven told as a Western. So I'm actually working on a page from the final issue of the series. It's an 8-issue series, and this is the last page of issue 8. So usually when I'm drawing, I will just be sort of, just talking about whatever as I go. So if you have any questions in the chat, feel free to leave them. If I don't respond right away, it's only because I got on a rambly jag, and I usually try to remember to check the chat every few minutes. So, but yeah, thank you for subscribing. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you enjoy. And I am drawing this on an iPad Pro in Procreate. which I fall more and more in love with every day. This is really becoming my weapon of choice. So I think right there I've kind of got everything that I need for this page. Because that's the main thing that I was thinking about or trying to express when I was talking about drawing too much. I'm like, what do I really need to tell this part of the story? And for this, water, bubbles, mountain, sky. That's all that's happening in this panel. I actually want it to feel very still and subtle in contrast to what comes next, which is this character dramatically rising out of the water. So the first thing I try to do is just block in my proportions. How far up do I want Michael to be? I want there to be a little bit of space above his head so that I can get more of those water splashes. And I want him to be coming out of the water up to about his waist. So let's say if his waist is here, maybe his pelvis is down there. So this line that's the bottom line, that's more of just me a marker for his physical proportions in terms of like working out his torso. So, it's just going to be water below his waist. But I like to get an idea of, if I measure out his entire head to crotch, then I can say half of that being the midpoint of the torso, and then half of that being the head. The whole Loomis measurement, with a figure being 8 heads high. Different people use different measurements, but I think the 8 heads high is kind of, I think, a figure drawing standard that a lot of people use. I know my instructor Carl Ganas at the Animation Guild, he mentions he likes that just because it's very simple numbers to break down, and I agree very much with that. It's much easier to draw a figure if you don't have to say, all right, this figure is 7.5 heads tall, and this other character is 6 heads tall. Obviously you want characters at different heights, but using that 8 head measurement makes it really simple to break them all down. At least as a starting point. Oh, Vince Moore, my buddy Vince, is in the chat. How you doing, man? Hope you're staying safe and healthy, staying out of the corona. And he says it looks like your setup has changed. Looks good. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just looked up online a simple tutorial for how to hook my iPad. I looked up how to live stream from your iPad. So I just am running my my iPad through QuickTime. And I just have that as the main image that's showing up on my desktop, and then I just took my webcam that I have, instead of having it mounted above my desk, I just have it sit in front of my table so that I can actually talk to people like human beings. You can see me while I'm drawing. So you can see my cats when they hop up on the desk and yowl at me while I'm working. Yeah, so I like this setup more too now. Thank you. And I see Amar says, I see Affinity Photo last lost favor for this project. That is true. For a while, I had switched from Photoshop because I'd been using Photoshop CS5, not Creative Cloud 5, CS5, a really old-ass version of Photoshop. And when I switched to my, I had to get a new laptop because my old laptop died. And when I switched, that laptop would no longer run Photoshop. So I had to decide, it would still run Photoshop, but it really wouldn't run Illustrator. So I had to decide, do I want to go ahead and finally sign up for the Creative Cloud, or do I want to look at some other options? And after looking around, I really felt like Affinity Photo was just really, really well priced, and it has become my Photoshop replacement for home projects. For work, on my work computer, I'm still using Photoshop, but for my personal projects, for now, I'm using Affinity Photo. So that is still there for doing a lot of layer work. When I'm really moving layers around and manipulating them, it still works really well. But in terms of digital painting and coloring, Procreate has really won me over. That long series I was doing, the Alice in Wonderland prints, those were kind of like my chance to experiment and really get to know Procreate on a drawing level. So that's the way I look at it. If I'm doing graphic design and manipulation, it's still Affinity Photo, so that it's still in my toolbox. Um, but when it comes to drawing, Procreate just feels so natural. Now, mind you, I haven't tried Affinity Photo on the iPad, and they make an iPad version. For all I know, it might be fantastic. I could try that. But at a certain point, you can spend forever trying this tool and that tool, and each one's going to have positives and negatives. I'm sure I could make it work if I were using that, if I were using Affinity Photo on the iPad. But I just figured, let me just get down to business and just get to making the comics, which is what I really want to do. And with that, Procreate has been fantastic. Okay, so I got caught up in, again, this is what I'm saying, I get caught up in the chit chat. Sometimes I miss what's going on. I get caught up in rambling and I miss what's going on in the chat. Let me scroll back up. So Amar says, I still use Procreate as a novelty app. I use 7.5 to 8. Gaming Artist says, I tuned in as I'm not so good artist and I want to see art from better artists. Well, that's kind of you to say. I will tell you that there's never a point where you stop feeling like I need to be a better artist, because I myself, I've been drawing for many years, but I still have a lot to learn. I consider myself a student. I do kind of the same as you do. I also watch other artists both on YouTube as well as taking classes and looking at instructional books. I'm still learning and growing, but hopefully anything that I can share that is useful to you, I am happy to share. In fact, I think I've mentioned this on more than one occasion, but I feel like what I hope that people get out of my channel is that we see a lot of artists who maybe are starting out and, their art is really raw and rough. And I think we see a lot of artists that are established professionals and we're like, oh my God, everything they do is beautiful. How do I get to be that good? What I don't think we necessarily get to see, or what is shared as much, is sort of that messy in between. I am certainly not a master draftsman, but I'm also, I have some grasp of the fundamentals, but I still struggle with those fundamentals, and I'm constantly revisiting those and learning. And I think that's interesting. What I hope people find interesting in my channel is that space where you know some of the stuff, but it's not ingrained in you. You're still constantly going back to your fundamentals of anatomy, volume, construction, composition, and still needing to reinforce those. And when you aren't attentive to those, when you slip up, it shows up in the work. And you always have to keep reinforcing it with every project, with every drawing, saying, oh wait, no, I need to make sure that I draw through the figure, that I, create a sense of volume, of having a front surface, a top surface, a side surface. Practicing turning volumes, making it feel like something is making a subtle turn or making a hard turn, learning to control the edges, which I think when you're talking about drawing, it's not necessarily the same as edge control when painters talk about it. But I think it very much is still an issue in terms of how you describe form, because light and edges are a huge part of that. So, but anyway, thank you for joining. I'm glad to have you. Let me scroll down through here. Let me see. Amar says at most 9.5 for giant characters. I'm not sure if you're talking about a version of an app or whether we're talking about file size. Darake says, I just use a line for the spine and wing it. Oh, yeah, you know what I do? Well, I usually put a line down for measurement. Oh, we're talking about heads. Oh, that's what it is. We're talking about 9.5 heads for giant figures versus like the 7.5 to 8.5. Yeah, I tend to use 8.5 as a starting point and then just move around as necessary. And Vince asks, did I try Clip Studio Paint? I've tried it before and I didn't love it. I know a lot of people swear by it. I'm not trashing the program. I'm saying I gave it a try and I didn't fall in love with it instantly. There was something about the interface that felt a little herky-jerky to me. I have it in. I don't have it for the iPad. I have the desktop version. So I've tried it. I own it. I'm not saying I'll never use it, but for now, Procreate has been what I seem to really enjoy the most. And again, I don't want to fall into that trap of just spending forever trying different drawing applications. Right. This right now, this pose is actually a little bit too static for me. Like with the thumbnail, I've got his arms a little bit closer to his body, like kind of pulled in a little bit more. So I'm going to erase his arms and kind of redo that part. And I think I want to try and push his chest up a little bit more. Like I've got these figures that I keep around for reference. It's so unsettling because the chat seems to be working fine, but every time I look over at my phone, I just see myself frozen. So I keep freaking out that the live stream's frozen, but I think it's just my the bandwidth on my phone side. But anyway, I think what I want. Whoops! What I want is to not rip this guy's hands off. Um, Instead of having him being straightforward, I want to get something where he's sort of bent back from the viewer a little bit. So he's going to be sort of, just kind of head up, kind of screaming out into the sky. So I'm going to try and push this pose, make it a little bit more dynamic. So I'm just going to leave this guy sitting here right above me on the drawing board while I draw. Usually what I do instead is I'll take I'll pose the character the way I want him, take a photograph on my phone, and then leave my phone next to the iPad to look at while I'm drawing. So I'm constantly doing that kind of thing with reference. Sometimes if I need reference, I will just take a picture of my hand, or I'll actually get up and stand and take an actual photograph. A trick that I want to say I learned it from, what's his name? Oh God, he's the guy who drew Mythos for Marvel. It's not Marcos Martin. I forget his name, but he's a great comic book artist, and he does a lot of Marvel work, and he shares a lot of his reference shots. I feel really bad about not remembering his name because he's a great artist, and I really like his work. But he has a blog where he shares all of his a lot, not all, but a lot of his reference shots. And I think that he had mentioned one time taking video of his work and then just capturing the still frame that captures what he wants. Because when you're taking photos, you have to pose, hold the pose, and press the button, and it's not quite right. Whereas if you're just taking video, you kind of get in the pose, kind of move around, try some variations of the pose, see if you get exactly what you want. Then you go back to the video, you scroll through, and maybe you just pick out 3 stills. They're like, these shots are the ones I want to use for reference. So it's a little bit of an easier technique. So I do that as well. But when I'm just working, at the desktop, it's just a matter of, taking a couple of quick shots. Let me scroll through here. Let's see. Amar says, my go-to is Clip Studio Paint. You know what? I know I'm jumping all over the place because I'm both drawing and talking, but I'm just going to, you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to erase all of this because I'm going to redraw this whole thing. So there's no point in me going through and erasing line by line. Because the first thing I want to get is that feeling of the torso. So let's say, here's the water, here's him coming out. And in fact, I'm going to block it. I'm going to start less with organic shapes and treat it more with blocks so I can focus a little bit more on that sense of volume. Really feel like there's planes. Like I want to get that sense of the torso receding back. And then maybe down here at the bottom, put a little bit of a curve. Like the pelvis is turning away from you. Really, I'm going to draw here at the bottom just through the water a little bit so you can see what I'm trying to get at, which is that his pelvis is sort of slightly tipped towards you. His rib cage is tipped away from you. That's what I'm trying to go for. That gives me that energy, like getting that bowing feeling of his chest just bursting out of the water. That's the first thing that I want to capture, is just in his torso, getting that sense of energy, and then hopefully being able to carry that through the arms and the rest of the figure. Because the easy part is just going to be water splashing out around him. That's just gonna feel. It's gonna be like directional lines, like an explosion, except it's gonna be water instead of energy or Kirby crackles. But it's going to give that feel. Let me go back to the chat here real quick. So, Amar says, my go-to is Clip Studio Paint because I can do page layouts and animate in it as well. Procreate is smooth, but it's only a little bit better than Autodesk Sketchbook. I've tried Sketchbook in the past too, and maybe it's worth me coming back to. I haven't used it in a long time. I used it when its very early phases, like several years ago. Gaming artist says, I'm an anime artist, but I still want advice. My profile pic is a piece of my art. Well, that's cool. It's hard for me to see because it's so small on my phone here, but no, it's cool. I mean, anime artists still need volume and construction, even though anime art looks very flat and 2D. I think some of the best, and like when I think of there's a lot of anime art that looks generic and it all kind of looks the same, and then there's artists like Masamune Shiro, Tetsuya Terada. Well, I mean, they're not really anime. They're manga. They do so many things. I think Terada is more of a fine artist with doing print and illustrations, even though he's done a lot of manga. But also he's done a lot of gaming design. I think Masamune Shiro is probably the first one that I think of. And I can't remember the name of the artist who does Blade of the Immortal, but that's another one where the artwork itself, even though you can tell that it is of the genre of manga and manga and anime, that it still feels like it has an individualness to it, and that individualness comes from the volumes that the character is using, the compositions. It's the actual line work on the end that makes it feel like manga or anime, but they're really drawing the hell out of that. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind, is that the fundamentals apply to all forms of drawing art. I mean, you can look at something like the Powerpuff Girls. They're still using basic volumes and composition there, even though it's very, very flat. So, oh yeah, and Amar, he explained what I was trying to figure out, which was in the numbers. He was talking about character head height. Yeah, I'm a little bit behind on the chat. Amar says, I use a gesture line, then add shape. Vince said, not Alex Ross. I can't even remember what I was talking about when I was talking about different artists. Oh yeah, in terms of using reference. I don't think it was Alex Ross who specifically said the thing about using video versus regular photographs. No, the artist I'm thinking of, he has a... you know what? I could really easily just come back to the chat and I can look it up. Well, you know what? I don't want to look it up. No, it's not it is not if you're on there, it's the artist who drew the series Mythos for Marvel. And I know that's not Marcos Martin, but I feel like I keep wanting to say Marcos Martin because I feel like it's a Spanish name. But the name is just simply not coming to me right now. Let's see here. And Amar says that's all he does is straight reference art, Alex Ross. And you know what? He does, but he's from the Rockwell school. It's not like he's copying art. First off, the photos that he does, he art directs those photo shoots. So the photography is still like, the reference that he is shooting is based on his own initial sketches and ideas. The ideas lead the reference, not the other way around. In fact, I did a video on it. If you search my channel for Norman Rockwell, I did a video on Norman Rockwell and the art of photo reference. And Rockwell's whole thing was that his rough sketches look the same as any other artist's rough sketches. It's not like you look at that and like, oh my god, the genius is in the roughs. It's like, no, he's just working out ideas with, little crappy thumbnail sketches the way any of us do. But once he has the idea, then he goes and hires models to shoot the reference that he wants. And he'll have like maybe 5 different versions of the pose, the same way that you may do 5 different thumbnails to try and work something out. He'll get photographs of all of the thumbnails that he likes. And based on those thumbnails, he will then begin doing his layout drawings and working out the finer aspects, the photorealistic aspects that we know as Rockwell. But I personally, I am a fan of photo reference. I wish I had time to use more, but what I find is that it really slows my process down when when I'm shooting a lot of photo reference. When I just have stuff that I can just pull and look at, that's one of the reasons why these figures are so useful. I also have an app on my phone called Handy that I will open up. It's got a bunch of CG hands, heads, and some other body parts that you can just open up and rotate them. So like little 3D models to look at while you're drawing. And that's just for me to get the basic volumes of whatever I'm working on. There was an issue, I think it was issue 2 of Morningstar, where I actually had a buddy of mine, my buddy Dan Smith. He came over to my house, my apartment at the time, and we just went through all my thumbnails, and I gave him props, and I told him what I wanted in terms of the character poses, and he just went through and we just did a photo shoot of the entire issue. So he just did all of the characters. There were monsters, male characters, female characters, and I just had him pose as all of those characters, and I did all the photos for them. But doing the photo shoot, arranging all of them, it was an afternoon to do the photo shoot. I probably spent another few days going through all the photos. In the end, I found that it made my work better, but it made my work slower. And part of that may be I still need to get better at using photo reference myself. I completely acknowledge that. Because there's a certain thing about, just like a computer tool, like computer software, there may be an app that's really good at getting results, but until you learn how to use it, it slows you down a lot. Photo reference could be the same way. And I still feel like I'm learning what works well for me with photo reference versus what there's things that I find that work well but slow me down. There's things that are quick but aren't as good, and then there's things that are quick but also speed up the process. And that's more of the workflow that I'm trying to lean towards, is things that speed up my creative process. Because sometimes, like for an illustration versus a comic book page, I feel like it's warranted, since it's just one still image, to spend more time on reference and setup, because that single image is the only thing that's the end result. Whereas when you're doing a comic book, it's drawing after drawing, page after page, and in the end, even with photo reference, if one page is a little bit wonky, if there's things that are off, it may not necessarily destroy the whole of the what I'm trying to communicate. All right, so bunch more comments in the chat. Let me scroll through and catch up real quick. By the way, scrolling to the bottom, Vince Moore, Paulo Rivera. Yes, Paulo Rivera. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. I am embarrassed I did not remember his name, because I think he's an amazing artist and I really do love his work. But yeah, he's somebody you want to look at, a contemporary comic book artist using the hell out of photo reference. It's like Alex Ross level photo reference, but it's quicker because he's mostly just taking photos of himself. I mean, Alex Ross literally works like Norman Rockwell. He casts his comic books, hires models. Sometimes he has friends doing it, but he has people who he has cast as characters, does photo shoots of all of their narrative arc and all the shots he's going to need for a particular project. It is a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time. But mind you, me not being Alex Ross and not having spoken to him about it, it looks to me that for the amount of work he does in terms of developing reference. He's very fast for the amount of work that he does. But he's doing painted comics, and that just takes longer. But for the level of detail that he's doing, the level of photorealism that he's doing, the reference he puts into it, for all that, he is very, very fast for what he's doing. So, let's see here. Let me scroll down through this. A couple of comments, a bunch of comments from Amar, and then another one from Gaming Artist. So let's see. Amar, when we was talking about Alex Ross, he says all he does is reference art, which looks good, but will look stiff, especially for dynamic comic book art. But he's famous for it. And it says Studio Ghibli does really go anime. I'm still more a fan of 90s anime art. Boris and Frazetta used a reference, which, yes, they did. That's another fantastic example. I don't know where it is. It's not in my studio right now, but I have a book of, I think it was called Boris Vallejo Fantasy Art Techniques. It was one of the first art books I ever had. A buddy of mine who lived across the street who was big into D&D gave me the book because he loved D&D, but I think he got it hoping that he could become an artist, and he just realized that he enjoyed D&D, but he wasn't necessarily into the actual drawing aspect. Whereas, I was still very young. I was probably in like 4th or 5th grade, and he was currently in junior high. He could see how much I loved drawing, so he gave me the book. And I still have that book to this day. It was a great reference. I think it really got me taking painting more seriously, even though I rarely do traditional painting anymore. But that was a fantastic book that I still have and cherish. So yes, Boris and Frazetta used reference. Amar says, but Frazetta was the master and the rest were students in regard to comic art. You know what? Can't argue with that. Yes. Well, I mean, he was a master in the same way that Kirby... Well, he was a master. Kirby was a godfather. Gaming Artist says, just asking, do you like my profile pic? I drew it as Naruto. Oh, yeah. See, I do actually, now that I look, I can see it. But it's not that I don't like it. It's more that it's so small that I can't tell. Right now, I'm not able to blow it up to get a good look while I'm drawing and doing this. And I've got like on my phone on the side. But from here, I can tell that it's Naruto, and it looks cool. So, good work. Keep at it. Let's see. So I'm all caught up. And I see Travis Fredericks in the chat. He says, what's up? Thanks for stopping by. Good to see you, man. All right. I worry that I always feel like I'm not getting enough done in these because I get so caught up in the chitter chatter. But I realize, let's see. It's already 11:40. Time flies. So hopefully you guys can see what I'm talking about versus the and the nice thing is when the live stream's over, you can even run back and excuse me. You can run back and look at the early versions of this figure that I drew first. And that hopefully this feels more dynamic, just the way that his torso is bent back. And I'm kind of trying to use the muscles to emphasize that level of foreshortening, a feeling like he's really pushed back, or his torso's pushed back. And his arms I'm trying to use them to communicate the volumes. Yeah, I'm using the muscles to try and communicate that level of overlap. By the way, Vince, I was going to mention to you, I started watching the, you posted a video on the Coffee and Comics Facebook of Dave Johnson, and I didn't know that there was a YouTube channel for the Drink and Draw Social Club, and I fell down a rabbit hole with that. I have been watching those while I'm drawing. If you guys are wondering what I listen to while I'm drawing, it's it's anything where it's got a bunch of artists talking craft and process, and they do a lot of breaking each other's balls, which is kind of fun too. So that's something else that I've been really enjoying, and I would not have discovered that if it wasn't for you, Vince. So thank you. So let's see here. So yeah, what I'm really trying to do is just get a lot of tension in this pose here. Like he's just like like it's almost like kind of a shot you would expect to see out of an issue of the Hulk, except it's somebody who is muscular but not as big, not necessarily as beefy as the Hulk. And just trying to work out the angles of his knuckles. And all the while, I'm trying to be mindful of how close I'm getting to the edge of the frame, because I do, that's a big part of the composition. There's some faint lines. The green line is sort of the safe area, or as long as I keep all the dialogue within that, there shouldn't be any problems. The blue line that's just outside of that is where I'm going to trim stuff for digital platforms, and then the red line that's a little further out is the actual trim line for comic book pages. So that's where the comic book page would be cut off, and then the blue outside of that is just another extra bleed that I have for when I publish the trade version. The cropping is slightly different, and that just gives me a little extra bleed on top of the normal bleed that's in the file. Bleed being the space outside of what your print area is supposed to be, so that when something's being printed, if it shifts a little bit, you're not going to have a bunch of white space when you get to the end of it. When books are being moving through the printing press, they shift, and if it just ends right at the trim line, then you're going to see, like, if it's a little bit off, there'll be white space there. Whereas if you have bleed, if it shifts, all you'll see is more artwork. Usually it's just like maybe an eighth of an inch, a quarter of an inch, really at most. The other thing here is I was going to have Michael framed by his wings. So now what I want to do is soften that turn, because if I make that corner too hard, it'll feel a little bit more like bat wings. I want them to feel like angel wings because he's an angel. Kind of framed like that. I feel like maybe I should make these wings a little bit lower, just so you can get more of that water splash that's going to be behind his head. Now, really, I should be looking at reference for what a wet afro looks like, because he's got kind of a small. He doesn't have like a big ass afro puff. He's kind of like a light afro puff in his hair. If anything, it kind of becomes more like natural, just natural hair at the edges. It's not like a real smooth afro. Now dividing the face. If I put the nose in the center, now since he's looking back so far, let's have this nose go up past where the eyes sit. Now, the point of his chin is right here, but I'm going to round this down a little bit so that I can kind of have his mouth a little bit open. See, this is where working digital gets you into trouble. Sometimes you zoom in too much. And you just spend time noodling on details that no one's going to see. Let's see. Gaming Artist says, when I draw, I find pictures off of Google for the poses and all the details for the anime characters. You know what? I do not think that's a bad idea to find poses off of Google, but I will tell you that the finest poses that are available to use as reference were done by the old masters. You look at Michelangelo, you look at Raphael, Leonardo da Vinci. Basically, you look up the Ninja Turtles, the real dudes, those guys, there's a reason why they're the masters. They were the art ninjas. If you go and you look at their artwork, what would actually be really interesting would be to take, in fact, that might be, I wish I had time to just do an art challenge. But it might be fun to take contemporary anime and manga characters and do them in poses from works of the Italian Renaissance. And I think that, and a lot of times, if you look at fashion photography, you know, a lot of photographers are very knowledgeable about all forms of art, not just photography. And they may be choosing a classical pose. They may be posing the model in something that may be, you know, that may be referencing a painting of the Madonna and Child or some other historical famous painting. So, point being is that the poses are very, very dynamic, and it doesn't, when you just grab something off of the internet, a lot of times people will say, oh, you're swiping, you're just grabbing that other, you know, somebody else's stuff, you're not really drawing your own things. Whereas if you do a piece based on a work of the old masters, it's both study and homage. Those people have really worked out, the old masters have worked out like the best possible versions of those poses. And if you just say, this is me doing my version of Naruto in, I don't know, a pose from Michelangelo's David, or a pose out of The Last Judgment. In fact, I would recommend you take a look at, there's a painting in the Sistine Chapel called The Last Judgment. And it's the biggest painting I've ever seen. The thing is friggin' huge. And in that, it's just a sea of figures. And a lot of the figures are historical people that were famous in Michelangelo's time. Some of them are people that he had to paint in there. Some of them are tributes and they're put in beautiful poses. Some of them are people who were enemies of Michelangelo. And he put them in not so favorable poses and compositions. So, but the point being is that it's a piece that's just littered with figures. And you could go through and take tons of poses just from that one painting. In fact, that was something that I've always been meaning to do, is just sit down and do a study of every single every single piece, every figure that's in the Last Judgment. Just go through and study the whole thing. That's a great thing to go through in terms of resources for character poses. So let's see. Darake says, got any tips on world building? That's a big topic. That's a tough topic. I don't I don't feel like I'm a master at world building as of yet. I mean, Morningstar, I feel like I probably could have done a lot more world building. Like, I never drew a map of heaven, and I feel like I should have in terms of working that out. Um, I think that when it comes to world building, it's real easy to fall into a trap of just drawing and drawing and drawing and never getting around to telling the story. So I think the first thing to ask yourself is, how much do you need in order to tell your story? You can break it down into locations, characters, and locations, characters, vehicles, and creatures. So those are the things that you need in your world. So my first step, I guess my first tip, your basic tip for world building is make a list of what you need. If you're telling a story, what do you need to show? I mean, don't make vehicles just to make vehicles. Sit down and say, all right, in this part of the chapter, this is like, if it's a space opera, this is going to be my main character ship, this is going to be my villain ship. Then you're going to say, all right, well, maybe I'm going to have space battles where I've just got these random drones or other vehicles just getting blown up during fights. Then maybe you design one or two random ships. Maybe you design one or two ally ships. Then maybe you have some incidental background ships. Really, in the end, you need to design like 7 ships. You need to figure out what's your list of main characters. Do you have any background characters? If so, maybe you just design styles of them. So basically, making a list of what you need for your world, and then sketching all of that out. And as you sketch it out, you'll probably develop a lot more. Even if you only need 7 ships, you may end up designing like twice as many. And then you've obviously got options to pick and choose from. You can cannibalize bits of design from one ship and say, you know what, I think if I take the wings from this ship, with the engines from this ship, with the fuselage from this other ship, I can make something that's really cool. Or if I can make this castle like this, but if I put this castle in space and I take the parts from this spaceship on there, you know, you can. That's my tips for world building. Is figure out what do you actually need, and then build that. And once you start building, then you can be open and fluid and maybe say, oh wait, there's some aspects here that I want to put in the story that weren't there before. You can, once you start the world building, then you can be kind of fluid about it and figure out what you do want to add, what you can take away from. You may realize there's stuff you start designing that you don't really need. So that would be my advice for world building. Make a list of what you actually need. Start from there. Amar says, I find Pinterest is my best source for reference. Also PureRef, which I signed up for the app. I just haven't used it yet. He said PureRef is great for tool for consolidating reference. I used to do photography, and that's always the best form of reference. Just get out there and take pictures. I co-sign that. Thank you, Amar. Is that for world building, you need to figure out what the main arc or direction of your story will take your characters. Yep, see, basically, yeah, exactly what I was talking about. He said, Amar says, I start out with the main characters and locations, then I build a Bible similar to Marvel or DC Character Bible. I've also done videos on this as well. Guys, click on Amar's icon, go to his channel, check out his videos. He's been doing a ton of work building both, but building a lot of amazing stuff in CG using, using CAD for both storytelling and both for animation and for building environments and props for comics. So a ton of work. I bow down to him. So definitely, if you want to see what he's talking about in terms of his world building, go over and check out his channel. He said, I also try to think about overlapping worlds as well. And that's a good point. You may start developing this world and saying, you know what, though? I may end up having a sequel, or kind of like Westworld, where you see the first Westworld and it's awesome, and then you find out about Samurai World, and we've seen, I don't know if you're watching this season of Westworld. I've been enjoying it so far, but we get a peek at I don't know if it's World War II world or whether it's Nazi world. But there's a point where they're in Nazi Germany and have to escape and fight their way out. I would like to think that it's World War II world because I mean I don't really want to think about a world where it's just Nazi world. That's but it's that point being is that yeah, that's the adjacent world things. You may find worlds that complement the world that you're originally building, that you're currently building. So let's see here. So there's going to be a lot of water splashing coming off of the side here. I'm just going to loosely indicate that. I'm going to come back in and flesh that out a little bit more. But for now, I want to get in here and just indicate we're almost done. So if you guys have any more comments at the end, you can throw those in the chat. I'm just going to block in very loosely what the last panel is. So let me erase this little bit that's down there. The last thing I'm going to do is just give you a sense of what the final panel of this page is. So this is sort of a quiet moment. I mean, it's a dramatic moment, but it's literally like now all hell is literally breaking loose. Lucifer is leading his army. The next sequence is going to be, seeing Lucifer and the next step is going to be seeing the actual attack on heaven beginning. But before that, also, I'm going to end up erasing Michael's face because it looks too nondescript here. I actually want him to look more pissed off. I think instead of him having his mouth kind of open, I may just have it frowning and then pull his eyebrows a little bit sharper, like more angry, like, just super intense and brooding. And I say that because this last shot is just going to be tight on his face. We're going to get, here's his nose, just a little bit wider. So his eyes are going to be glowing. There's going to be light out. The idea being that when he was underwater, God sort of revealed some secrets. Basically, he revealed Lucifer's origin and why Lucifer is what he is. And it's just like, all right, I tried to give everyone the opportunity to do the right thing, and they're not doing it. So you are going to need to go in there and be the hand of God and whoop some ass. So that is what's happening to Michael right here in terms of like he is now resurfacing after God just basically told him what he gave him his marching orders, and now he's sort of supercharged, and he's going to go in there and stop Lucifer from taking over heaven. Not single-handedly. He's going to have the help of his fellow archangels, the ones that haven't turned against them. And I haven't mentioned this in a long time, but I'm definitely treating this story more like a mythological story. I'm not a particularly religious person, even though I was raised in a religious household. My goal is not to be disrespectful to Christian faith or to proselytize or to evangelize for it. I'm just telling a story that I feel like it's a dramatic, mythological story using the ideas of archangels and Lucifer's fall to tell what I think is a very powerful mythic story. So that's really where I'm coming at here. Because I realize there's a lot of God talk and angels going on here at you. And I just wanted to give you guys a sense of where I'm coming from in telling this story. So I think it's something that, I've mentioned that when I've talked to people at comic conventions who were people of faith, and I made it clear to them that this is a mythological story. It's not like I'm trying to make it true or accurate to scripture, because I don't want them to think they're buying one thing and get something else. I want them, if they think that the concept is interesting and they want to hear about Lucifer's fall from heaven told as a Western, I want it to be something that would be accessible to people regardless of their faith, that they would just find it's an interesting story. So that's sort of the approach I'm taking with this. All right, so let me just pop back to the chat real quick, and then we will call it a night. Or a day. My sense of time is all screwed up. Let's see. In terms of overlapping worlds, oh yeah, Amar says Stephen King does this as well. He's one that immediately comes to mind when thinking about this. He says, man, these Sundays every 2 weeks come and go really fast. Well, as I've mentioned, I do a once a month bonus video on my Patreon. Now, up till now, they haven't really been live streams. I record them live, but I haven't been posting them early enough to let people that are on Patreon know when I'm doing them. But I've been doing my my art book study group, going through Walt Reed's The Figure. And I really feel like when I'm done with that, I should do... I've been trying to decide what to do next. For a long time, I've teased Andrew Loomis, but I've been going through and looking a lot just for the recent page of Morningstar. The page before this, I was drawing some horses, and I was looking at, I have the Weatherly Guide to Animal Drawing. And the fact that I still need to reference this book all the time, I am nowhere near as much work as I have to do to continue to learn how to draw the human figure better, and I'm still working to master it. I've got 10 times as much work to do on drawing animals. So I've been thinking about possibly doing that. I still have a bit to do to finish Walt Reed's The Figure, but I don't know if people are even really interested in that in terms of this series. So we'll see. But yes, they go quickly, but I do a bonus video once a month on my Patreon. Gaming Artist says, there's one thing I'm good at that's not art, it's writing. He says, as he approached a nearby rock, crouched down by it, tears started to form in his eyes. The man who killed his father would never be found. You know what? It's good that you have writing as a craft, because the fact of the matter is, with drawing, yes, the work, it's hard to learn to draw, but you can visually see the improvements step by step. Whereas with writing, a lot of times, you make steps forward and steps backwards. It's hard to properly evaluate it. It's even more subjective in terms of evaluating it than I'd say drawing is. Drawings, you can literally look at something and say, yes, this is in proportion, no, it's out of proportion. Yes, you did get a sense of volume, or no, you didn't. The light is coming from the right direction, or no, the lighting is confusing, you've got coming from multiple sources. Writing is, I think, a lot harder to evaluate. So if you have a natural affinity for writing, you know what, lean into that and continue to build on top of that with your drawing to complement it. So it's a good thing that you've got a good writing sense. I'm working on my writing as well. I'm always, well, not always, but I should be reading more. But I'm always trying to read books about the craft, read fiction and nonfiction just for learning, writing, looking at other people's writing. So it's all an ongoing process. Amar says, I hear you, because one of my comic book universes includes this story as well, but it may have a Lovecraftian vibe to it. That sounds dope. I think that you mentioned that before, and I said, you got a reader right here, because I definitely want to check that out. He says, backgrounds are my crux, because I know how I am. If I can get my background to the same level of other art, I'll be happy. I know most of it is just being lazy. You know what? I think that's true of every creative craft. Music, writing, filmmaking, comics. Yeah, it's all hard, and sometimes we're just not in the mood to do the hard thing. But the hard thing is what I think that's where the magic is leaning into that and learning how to master those things that we're just like, I don't want. It's like, go ahead, put in the work and find the magic in there. So this is where I've got so far. Where I would go from here, and you'll probably see over the course of the week, I'll post some on social media, I'll post some on Patreon. But basically from here, it's tightening up these a little bit more, and then flipping it. Let me flip this right now just so you can see. Flipping it, and then I'll draw over this and make corrections. Like the minute I flip this, you can look at the bottom figure. He looked fine before, but now that you look, you can see that his face feels crooked. His nose is crooked, and it feels like his eyes are shifted to the left versus his nose. These are the reasons why you flip your canvas. A lot of digital artists usually flip back and forth as they go. I should do that more now that I'm working digitally and I have the opportunity to do that. I do find it easier to just do it once and then flip it over and make corrections, but who knows? Maybe I will start doing the flipping back and forth and back and forth. Maybe I'll do that, and then when I'm done, I just convert all of this to gray. It's something to think about. All right, this may really heavily change my my process. I never really thought about that before, but now that I'm looking at this and thinking about it, that might be the way to go. It's just flip back and forth as I go, and then convert the whole thing to grayscale when I'm done. But let me undo this because I've still got a little bit more work to do on that version. All right, guys. So, gaming artists, if you ever want writing your pictures, start a live stream, tell me the storyline. I can help you out if you want. I appreciate that. Generally, I really like to do my own writing because it's very personal to me. I feel like the writing is an extension of the art, and I appreciate the offer, but I like working on my writing craft as opposed to having stuff just given to me. All right, Amar says, everyone stay safe out there, and you as well. Thank you, and that goes to all of you. Stay healthy and safe. I hope that you and your loved ones are safe in this rough time. Thank you, everyone, for watching, for spending time with me. Let me pop back out of the gallery real quick. And, of course, as I mentioned at the top of the show, patreon.com/Jeremy. There's a .net at the end of this. That's just an old thing that I need to get rid of. It should just be patreon.com /GERIMI. It's my Patreon. You can subscribe there for as little as $2 a month. Like I said, you get a bonus video once a month. In addition, you get tons of behind-the-scenes work-in-progress artwork and blog posts. If you want to see what I'm doing, I send it the rest of the time. I send out a monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. I share the best of my social media posts. I'll usually include links to one of these videos that I put up there, along with other little bits of goodies here and there. And there's amazon.jeremy.net. That's if you want to buy physical copies of my book, or if you read digitally on Amazon Kindle, you can order them there. So thank you so much, guys. That's it for now. Go be creative.